I did get out of all of this magic.
There you go. That's all you need.
It's a private price. He's like, well, what you want to do is fine. Yeah, he did. You want to take a look at what you're trying to wipe that off. And then it's like, you want to position it. I mean, I get it. Here's some position.
Yeah, but the soul.
Right. So he's like, saddle soap for the soul. Magic eraser. I think it's really that you can actually find the sand. The sand is really no sense in it. It's like, oh, the vibrant crystal response to the soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's soul. But I knew.
You finally said, oh, you can use a magic eraser. Like, oh, that's all I need.
Yeah. Fred's in the house.
Fred's in?
Yeah.
Invisible.
We can add Fred to the list now.
So I sent the link to Tom, and he's like, unsubscribe, unsubscribe.
Which one?
That article I sent you.
Which one was it,
The
though?
one about the playing party.
Yeah, unsubscribe.
It was so funny, so I read the whole thing, and it was hilarious.
Oh, you got the stream.
Fred's pooping. Officially set on the stream. You heard it here, folks.
Oh.
In a phantom camera.
Totally broadcasting there, too.
Oh, right now? So don't say anything.
You can talk about Fred's poop, his BMs.
No, Fred, it just shows your name. Oh, he doesn't want to be seen?
Not
Oh
tonight.
my gosh, it's tasty. Hey Mike, have you been on that
What? What? Oh, God, no. Last time I was there was young. I wasn't climbing Kilimanjaro, I'll tell you that much. Minutes.
Four minutes.
Closer to I put when I get in the middle, when I get to the middle here.
You stand in the middle and hype this up.
Yeah.
No Dave Rowett tonight.
That is that test of strength. No, it's put them back together without it.
Is this on Quick Vid? Should I use it?
Dang it, no, it's, man, that's been neglected.
Come on.
3 minutes.
Killing me. Let's just say my phone is slow.
They'll run on the same damn time. Alright, do this.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, we'll get started now and everyone's cozy and everyone knows each other very well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Bates and I'm a developer over at the Video Project and one of the founders of the Web Devs group, and I'm really excited to see such a packed turnout tonight. We will definitely be looking into a new spot for next month, so we'll be exploring some options for the next couple of weeks. And hopefully it doesn't have to be so intimate next month. Tonight we have Tom Rankin talking on Angular. It'll be a pretty high-level overview, but I did get a glimpse of it today, and it is some really strong content, even just being beginning stuff, so it'll be good. I just wanted to get a couple of announcements out of the way. Springfield Creatives meets up on February 19th over at the Randy Bacon Photography Studio downtown. So be sure to hit that up. The next .NET group is on the 24th, right? And they'll be going over Grunt, Incan, Bauer.
Yep.
Awesome. It's at the Library Center. So the one on the public there. Sorry.
Okay.
Campbell, yeah, my bad.
West Stanford.
That's right. Yep. How many in here tonight are from .NET Group? Awesome.
Oh, right on.
Welcome, guys. Welcome. I've been going, both Tom and I have been going to that for on and off now for years, and
It's been around for a long time.
solid content, and we're excited to have you over here. So, wanted to give a shout out to Kaylee and James. Right, you guys took first place. Is that right? At the startup weekend. So that'll be awesome to hear.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, they actually, there's a lot of people here, but when I was leaving there earlier this afternoon, they were really interested in coming, but a lot of people have like families and stuff.
Sure.
So, but they did say that anyone who wants to come and check out the space tomorrow should totally check it out. It's 405, and if anyone wants to get a hold of me on Slack, I can tell you exactly where. And it's a nice space. There's couches. There's a really fantastic working environment, and there's also some huge conference rooms and much, much bigger conference rooms. It's in the same place as they do 1 million times.
Awesome.
So if anyone wants to show up and check out a pretty sweet co-working space and possibly a place that we can have this that isn't quite so intimate, that would be an option.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for the info. And I think also, this isn't a very big group, but the Atlassian user group, also they met at the Foundry, I think a month ago. I think they're there next month sometime too, so I don't have official details on that, but check that out if anyone's interested in the Atlassian stuff like Jira and Confluence. So, other than that, we'll be looking for some topics. If anybody has anything they want to present on, find me afterwards. And the next meeting here will be, well, not here, but our meeting will be on March 4th, and then April will be on April Fool's Day. So, anyways, I'll get out of the way and let Tom do his thing. So, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike. So, Tom Rankin, I'm the technical director over at the Alpha Media Project. I've been there for about 15 years. I'm really a full stack dev. I don't do as much coding today as I used to or as I would like. But I have done a little bit of Angular work lately. We kind of identified a project that seemed like it would be a really good fit. So I had a small starter project, did a little mobile app in Angular to test it, see if it was going to work for us. And really kind of learned that I liked it. What I liked about Angular was that I found that my mental model of how it worked matches how it works. You know what I mean? So what I found was a lot of scenarios where I just tried something where I thought that maybe if I wrote code like this, it should work. And I really found that there was some nice synergy there. Kind of blew that out into a moderate-sized app and found that it's functional. I don't know how many people know what Angular is or is not, but it's basically a client-side stack for application development. It handles routing and plumbing for communication with servers. It handles view management and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go over, and these are really some of the key topics, key concepts. With Angular views, which are really the template side of things, the part that's responsible for showing UI to the end user. Filters. Filters are functions that are designed to manipulate your data. If you're a .NET guy or somebody who writes views in something like C#, a lot of times you'll have logic and link data to filter and manage your stuff. Angular provides a filter mechanism that allows you to write methods for altering your data. Controllers. Controllers are responsible for managing the view. They set data up for the view and they handle events coming back from the view. Directives. Think of directives as widgets, modules, things like that. They're not primary responsibility components. They're really, in my opinion, more secondary. But they're pretty powerful. I mean, you could write an entire app with directives alone, but I think of directives as controllable widgets, things that you can include and reuse, while controllers are very much for screen execution. Services. The service layer in Angular, again, is responsible for really your data management, your model management, and your business logic. So as far as implementing your rules in your application, that typically will go in kind of the service layer. And is not typically something that you would put in your controller layer. I realize some of it may be Greek or whatnot, so I think it'll become clear as I walk through the code. Routing, the .NET people will know, I think a lot about routing. I'm sure Rails people know routing and things like that. It's basically a set of rules that maps a URL to a screen or to a set of actions and things like that. Angular provides services for that. And then resources. There are libraries in Angular associated with retrieving remote data and things like that. Specifically, there's a set of libraries called, where there's a module called resources that is opinionated about how to talk to servers to retrieve data. Nothing. I'm going to do this, and I'm not an Angular expert, so that's one thing to be really clear about. I've used it. I feel familiar with it. I have opinions about it, but I haven't used it in what I would consider truly enterprise level work. So questions are welcome. Please ask questions if you want to know anything. I won't guarantee that I can answer. Okay. I'm going to try to go through this. My intent is to go through a coding exercise. I'm going to walk through this and kind of code this thing up as I go. But it really kind of grew. It outgrew a little bit of what I intended to do. Not that it does anything great or spectacular, but there are things that I don't have memorized. So I will likely struggle a little bit. I'll fat finger some things. So I'll probably code some things up and then it will not work. And I'll be doing the dance. Oh, why's that not working? Why is that not working? I hope to mitigate that, but please bear with me. That's a little bit of what I'm expecting. I hope it won't occur, but we'll kind of get there. All right. So fire it up. Is this view going to work for people? I pulled this side by side. A little bit of code view. Yeah. Yeah.
A little more, maybe.
Maybe Command Plus.
Yeah. Too big?
I can't see it. It's too big.
All right.
Give him the stick. Oh, give him the stick.
Can the lights here go off or dim or leaving the others on?
Yeah. Jump down back here. I'll try.
Tom's comfort level.
No, not that one. Not that one.
Lens of gnarly glare.
This is your home. Clever doesn't work here.
No.
Good? Oh, yeah.
real intimate.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so what I wanted to illustrate here a little bit was, Angular enhances, in my opinion, enhances HTML. What I love about Angular is that you can use HTML templating. A lot of systems will use templating where you kind of write the HTML script as a variable and things like that. But it becomes hard. You got to deal with line breaks. You got to deal with a bunch of stuff like that. And Angular really enhances just regular old HTML. So I wanted to fire up and create an Angular app. The text is a little big, so you may not see it as well as I expect. But basically, I'm going to include the Angular library, and then I'm going to have my own library that I'm going to write for the Angular work. And that's over here in app.js. It all kicks off with angular.module. I like to think of this particular command. There are two variations of angular.module. There's one where it takes the parameter and an array of libraries to be used, and that's really what that empty array is. Yeah.
Is app.js a convention?
I think it is.
Okay.
I do think that it is. It's not a requirement. In your index.html, you specify the app or whatever JS file you want to include, and that will get evaluated and executed. There's two uses really of angular.module. One is this version that takes the name, and the other parameter is an array of libraries to be included. I don't have any yet, but every time you write this particular command, I like to think of this statement as saying initialize a configuration manager, because that's really how Angular works. It's all about configuration. So this basically says create a configuration manager. And this is really the key word that everything is grouped and managed by. It could be anything. It could be your name. It could be whatever. So it's really just kind of that common thread that you use in your app to tie everything together. So really, you just have to initialize it, and then somewhere in your app, you have to include this call. I think I'm typing that right. Matches. And lo and behold, we've got an Angular app, right? Nothing exciting. But that's it. I mean, so at this point, we really do. We have Angular running, and what I'll do to demonstrate that is I'll throw in the curly brackets. I don't know what a word is to define this, and I'll put in a string. And Angular basically will look at that as an expression to be evaluated and output to the screen. So you can see I've added some more exclamation marks, etc. But that's a string literal. Just as a quick example, this is a cheat. So Indian is not something I use very often. I'm just creating a variable called test. I should be able to put that in there as well. Kind of thing. And Angular now resolves that variable as something that it can use in scope. So this is the piece where really a lot of times you'll see data. So a lot of times when you've got the brackets, you're outputting data. That's your output component. So I'm going to lead into a little bit of the filters side of this, because a lot of times you don't want necessarily just strictly to use the data literal, right? We want to manipulate it. We want to convert that information. And that is executed by this pipe command. So a pipe command, anytime you see it in Angular, basically means take this expression and run it through this filter, okay? Let me go over and add the filter. All right, so this goes on to the next step, right? So I consider this my configuration manager, and then this is the other version of the calls to Angular.module. And basically, that version of the call means retrieve the configuration manager, right? So get a reference to the configuration manager and add a filter to it. The filter is called universe. And filters basically take an input and provide an output. So the input, obviously, is going to be the string literal over here that we passed in.
Could you assign the first call to a variable and then call that variable.filter instead of rewriting it every time?
Assign the first call. Go ahead.
Like back in app.js, and I have no idea how any of this works, but I'm just wondering on line 3 if you could say var blank equals this, and then down on line 5 say this.filter, whatever that variable name was.
Var app equals Angular.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's a common thing that you'll see.
Okay.
Var app equal, and then absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that works, and that's a common thing to do. I don't like it because it's just a personal thing. I don't like variables in my global space, kind of thing. Not that there's necessarily going to be a terrible thing about it. That's the reason I don't. I just have a tendency to not want to throw variables in the global space. But yeah, it is very common to see that in Angular. And it is identical. So that's all this does, is this takes place of that app call. It retrieves that item. So in this particular filter, I'm literally just taking the input. I'm going to append the word world onto it. Just for giggles, I'll add SGF Web Devs, right? So basically, it takes that data, that hard-coded data, and it runs it through the filter. Right? No filter. Yeah. We made it through step 1.
All right.
Yeah.
Can we make the JS just a little bit larger font-wise?
Really?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, a PHP storm does not have like one. It doesn't keep one set per file type, I think, so I have to blow it up. Just remind me to blow it up each time, because I won't remember. All I'm doing here, so is I've saved and get kind of my steps as I go through this. I'm kind of cleaning it up and make sure I'm at the next step. Yeah, there we go. And we'll see a couple of things that I didn't do quite the same, etc. So bear in mind, I'm going to execute a couple of commands in between. All right, let's get into doing something a little more interesting. So I talked about views, and I also mentioned that controllers are really responsible for managing the view. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go configure a controller, and I'm going to call this color controller. That also is just a convention. I wanted to showcase something here because what you'll see in Angular apps is the variables. So color controller basically returns a function that this is the initializer for that controller. Every time your app needs one of these, it basically will run this, and Angular will inject the variables. This particular variable, all of the variables in the function declaration are dependency injected, kind of thing. So Angular, when you register this controller with the controller method, Angular is keeping track of the fact that you've registered it. So every time it needs one, it's going to resolve all of the variables for the function and kind of inject all of the other stuff in your application. Right now, we're using the scope variable. And the scope variable is the primary mechanism that the controller has to talk to the view. Okay? This is where we set up data. So I think of scope as being data, but it also it has code. I mean, you write functions and things like that, and that's how you make function calls from the view available to the view from the controller. So I've got a color list here. And we're just going to get a little bit.
So is what you're doing now analogous to like a model, or should I not really even think of a model view controller kind of?
No, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, so Angular is a model, what do they call it? Model view, whatever. But yeah, model view controller is really the kind of cool pattern that I'm going with here. I consider the controller to be a view controller, which has a little bit of a slight context association with it. But yeah, what I just set up here is really more model.
Okay.
And that brings up a good question. As I go through this, I'm kind of doing some anti-patterns as I go through it, and then cleaning them up as I go. I'm doing the anti-patterns as I go through because I think it makes the communication a little bit easier. Just because like this particular variable I wouldn't set up here, I'll set it up somewhere else later, but it will make this execution just a little bit easier. So yeah, essentially what I've done, if you guys remember like the ng-init, and I created that test variable, now this color list variable is available to my view. So I'm going to do something interesting, a little bit more interesting here. And at this point I need to bind, I need to Angular to tell, I need to tell Angular this portion of my HTML is managed by that controller. So I'm going to use what's called the ng controller directive. And here's one of the really kick-ass features of PHP Storm, right? PHP Storm does a great job of knowing all the files and the things that I have in my project, and it's already presenting me with the Angular controllers that I have available. So I can select that. And just to make sure things are kind of working right, we're just going to print the length. So you can see I've got 133 items, so that tells me I wired things up properly. I'm going to create a table, create a row for each item in the list. Now I'm going to use the ng repeat. So you guys, anybody in here Cold Fusion people? This feels very Cold Fusion-esque to me, right? I mean, all the little tags and things like that. Say again?
I started out with Cold Fusion a long time ago.
Yeah.
So anybody will have met it.
Yeah. So in your view, like when you're iterating, like in a lot of templating engines, you'll just say, you know, for every item in the array, and then close the code, you know, module, write out the HTML, open that back up, finish your stuff, and then it all compiles up. You won't see that in Angular. In Angular, everything is going to be controlled by some type of a directive and some type of control. That's why filters become so important, because you can't perform some of those tricks that easily. So you'll pipe all that information through a filter to get it to list your data out. And the syntax is color in color list. So this variable is the one that's available, and basically ng repeat will evaluate this, and for every item in there, it's going to repeat this whole row. Now I have a new variable available called color, and I think my data set has a hex. So my color list has colors and hex values. This is the example where I was going to say I'm going to key some things in, and it's not going to quite work the way I anticipated.
Yeah, there's an object, isn't it?
Color here, yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you very much. Perfect. Color.name, and thank you. Color.hex. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And just to showcase real quick too that this color object is available in my row as well. You can use it besides using it in the content. Let's say, right, and get the rainbow going on, right? Yeah, groovy, right? Okay.
How would you go about excluding one of those colors?
Yeah, with a filter. I mean, I could probably exclude one.
But yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah, and I'll run this through. I'll run this stuff through a filter real quick. That's my next step. Yeah. So I'm only going to showcase a couple of Angular directives. Anytime you see this kind of syntax, it's a directive. Angular has a bunch of them, so don't feel like you need to write a filter for everything or you need to write a directive for everything. Angular also provides a lot out of the box. I'll give you an example.
Are those removed from the actual HTML of the page? Or do they cause any, like,
No, they're not.
They won't validate unless
you prefix them with data.
Okay.
So you can do data and it's still working.
That's right.
But I mean, as far as like,
Yeah.
W3C.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But again, so they may, but it's not server-side rendered. But yeah, it is. They will show up in your code, and all that stuff will be in there. And there are. I mean, you're right. There are syntax mechanisms to make it valid and use the data attributes and things like that. I'm going to change this up and add a filter. Angular has one called order by, and filters also have a parameter, so you can add parameters. So instead of just taking the input and making output, you can take the input and add additional parameters. So the order by takes a parameter of what field to order by. It's probably already ordered by name, so let's go by hex. We can sort them by their hex value. Okay. I'm going to create another filter real quick because I want to reverse these.
So did you put the filter on the ng?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a little hard to see because I've got to scroll over. But yeah, right there in the ng repeat color list. And then yeah, I added the filter here.
So you can basically just pipe in and filter on any direction.
Yeah. Okay. On anything that gets evaluated. So you can put a filter on expressions, and that's what this basically is. This piece is an expression that gets evaluated by Angular. You can pipe those through filters. So I'm going to call one called reverse, create a filter called reverse, just so I can flip the list. Now I'm just going to take this same thing and pipe it through the reverse filter, right? Blah, X, reverse, unreverse, right? So you can also chain filters, right? And they basically get evaluated all the way through the chain. Honestly, I don't know. I assume order by gets evaluated first and then reverse. Yeah. So I thought about that explicitly. One of the things I wanted to show here is, I've added a specific field here. I've hard-coded field that I want to order by. So I wanted to add, I think that's my next thing, is I wanted to add a little bit of UI to allow me to control that particular variable, allow the end user to select what they can order by. So in order to toggle that state, I'm going to add, I'm going to add a variable. I'm going to default it to name, right? So when the page loads, by default, we're using the selected order by field. So instead of hard coding that to name, I'll tell it to use the selected order by field. And if I change that over here to hex, we're good, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So I want to make that user selectable. Sorry, so I have a few templates in there to kind of help me along through this. But basically, I'm just creating a quick form. I don't know if this one, yeah, this one's already coded up with all the fields. But this is the key right here, right? So ng model. So I've created an input field of type radio, but it is bound. Ng model basically means to bind that control to that variable. So when the user selects that, it's actually going to change the value of the variable to the value of the input field, kind of thing, and that will happen automatically. And this is the two-way binding, right? So if I change it behind the scenes, if something else changes it in the controller or at a service level, then this UI component will catch that and swap vice versa, if I click on it by the user or the user clicks on it, it will change the variable value. That kind of thing. So I think that I've found that correctly. And you can see now the user can select which field. And that basically all that is doing is altering this value. When I select that. Am I going too fast? Does that make kind of sense?
Yeah. Good.
So one thing that I wanted to show that I forgot to show here. I'm showing that I'm reversing this value here with a filter, but I wanted to showcase that you can also use filters in your controller, and that's where some of the dependency injection will come in. So over here, I'm going to tell my controller that I want to use the reverse filter. And basically, again, so Angular is keeping track of all the things that I've configured and that I've registered. So when it creates my controller now, it's going to resolve that reverse filter. Adding the capital filter on the end is just convention. Thank you. So it's taking anything that I've registered and basically adding that filter extension on it. So I could easily say scope reversed or equals reverse filter. So I'm going to take the same list and just reverse it here. I'm going to verify real quick that it's not reversed, but I have created a new variable that is now filtered here. I'm just going to tell it to use the reversed list instead.
Are you reversing?
Yeah, I think
I have a reverse on the end, do I?
Didn't you leave it in the
argument?
Yeah.
I think I took it out.
Like right in the function declaration.
Directory called scope in the module call.
Here?
No. 17.
17. That's just where I'm including the module.
Oh,
so that piece right there is just where I'm saying that I need it.
I need it to be including module with pre-existing module reverse filter.
No. No, so that's the one that I created right here. Yeah. So I wrote that reverse filter, and then by convention, Angular is registering that as available with the capital F on it.
Okay. Yeah. But it doesn't require the dollar sign, is it?
No. Yeah, the dollar sign is all Angular internal objects. Yeah. I think I've got it reversed. I'm clearly doing something wrong. Reversed. Oh, that's.
Oh, you're reversing it and then ordering it. Yeah.
Ah.
Your order by is undoing your reversing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, good. And again, those are the scenarios I expect to kind of run through. I apologize for the awkwardness of it. And I'm very happy that you're astute in picking that up for me. Really appreciate it. Yeah, that was kind of it. So I just wanted to illustrate that you can use filters on the template side, but you can also use those same filters on the backend side. And
there are a lot of convention things like that, like filters, name your controller, color controller.
That's me.
Is that just you?
Yeah, I don't think the names of the controllers have any convention associated with them. I can't think of scenarios that are getting resolved. Getting resolved based on that. But again, I'm a little inexperienced, so I could say that, and somebody in here, I'm sure, has written something great with it. All right, that's my next step. Reverse. All right, I'm going to move on to directives. Give you an example right now. This particular piece that I've added here I consider to be something that is directed worthy, right? The selection piece. It's not necessarily view specific. I could, in theory, use that for other lists and other things that may have a name and a hex value, which are all other things. But I think, yeah, but I'm also going to refactor this a little bit. Typically, you're not going to include all of your stuff in one file. And in fact, I'm going to refactor, but even my refactorization is not optimal. It's still, I'm still going to have several things in files, but I'm just going to break these things up just a little bit. Mike, what was my quick command?
For what?
For creating files?
Oh, Control Insert or Alt Insert. Damn Windows.
And really just going to create one file for each of the different kinds of things that we're going to manage, right? So I know that if I'm going to make a directive, I'll put it in the directives. If I'm going to make a filter, I'm going to put it there. Oh, you know what I should do? Yeah, just thanks. There you go. Sorry. It's important for me to be in the right state. Controllers. Filters. That's it. I also like to have my templates in kind of a templates directory. My naming convention, the things that I'm going to use on this particular project are not great. But yeah, I think we get the point. So what I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and blow this out. Down here, right here, where I'm just including my core Angular library and my app, I'm going to blow that out and basically include all of the other files that I've just created. And that's really all I've done is you still have the Angular library, you still have app, but now this is going to include the rest of the files. It's functionally equivalent to having one app.js file that has everything in there. It's just broken up a little bit differently for management. There really is no core difference. So I'm going to move the controller to its home. Move the filters to their home.
Have you seen that?
Oh yeah. And I'm just copying and pasting them to the proper file. I don't think I can blow up the name of the files over here. But that's the filters file and the controllers file. In theory, if I've not messed something up, this all still works. Oops, no, I missed a step. This reminds me that I missed a step. So one of the things that I showed you was model binding. You know, we can model bind here. What I also added here was just two input boxes in the list, bound to the name into the hex field. So you can see that the two-way binding kind of thing, orange, and the same thing occurs right here with the color. So that again is just updating the model on the fly kind of thing with the binding. I apologize for that. My intent right now is to now move this to a directive. You know, I've got this piece of code in here that I don't consider part of my primary view of color management. So I wanted to create a directive to house that.
Zoom in a bit.
Yeah. And I'm just going to call it sort color list selector. So it's for sorting the color list, and it's the selector. Let's go over. I don't need. I'll go over scope in a minute because I'm going to use that again here in a minute. I don't need a link. I'll go over that in a minute. So really, all I'm defining is a directive called sort color list selector, and I'm telling it that this is the template to use. This is the HTML file to use as its layout, right?
First statement.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'll demonstrate that in just a second. It'll be easier to demonstrate than to talk about, I think. So I'm going to move this into that template. Sort. I'm really just going to replace. I'll replace that content. So if I've done it right, hopefully, yeah, PHP Storm is smart enough to realize that I've created a directive and really auto-populated that for me. So one of the things to see is that you define your directives in camel case, right? You use your directives in what is called snake case. I don't know why. I'm sure it's got to do with namespace resolution and or HTML validation kind of thing. And hopefully, if I've done these 4 things correctly, then it will just know that you can see that this is still here and it still works.
Can you inspect it so that actually comes out as HTML?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort.
Yeah. That one right there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So let me showcase a little bit about what some of those options are there, right? Replace is an option in your directive to tell it whether or not to take the element that you put in code, right? I put this piece in here, and I can either leave it there and inject my code in the middle of it, or I can replace the whole piece. So if I say replace true, you can see right here it's sort color list. You can see now it's just the
oh, nice.
Thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the restrictions real quick. So there are a number of ways of defining a directive on your page or putting a directive on your page. I'm using the element notation syntax. I'm defining an element named this. I could just as easily say div class equal. Yeah, it would be better if I say it. Put this in a clipboard. You can do it as a class. Right.
That's all you need?
Yep. And that's what the restrictions are for. So this basically means restrict it to element, restrict it to class, or restrict it to attribute. Okay. So I'm going to do it as a class. I think that you'll see that it's div class. Blah 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 blah.
That's awesome.
Or I can say it is an attribute with really no value. Right. Thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. And if I take that restriction out, so if I tell it that it can't use an attribute, it really shouldn't render. So it's me specifying how end users are going to be able to define or to use my controller or my directives. Right on.
So is AEC effectively wide open at all of them?
That's all 3 that I know of. All right, so I cleaned it up a little bit. I've moved my files out. I've directivized my sort order. Okay. I'm going to move on to a step where I'm going to create I'm going to make another directive now. I want to add items to my list. And this will showcase a couple of the other features of directives. I guess one of the things that I should point out is that in this particular directive, you can see that I copied that code over to the template, and I still have the names of the fields in the original controller's scope here, right? So my directive is inheriting the scope of the controller. I typically don't do that. I typically actually overwrite the scope and create my own internal scope. But in your directive, if you don't specify a scope, it inherits the containing controller scope and basically acts like I'm just manipulating and working with those items.
So if you use that directive in a different app entirely, then it would go.
Right.
Or it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be valid here. The reason I left it like this is it was simple. I only had to copy the template over to a file and then move the directive into this place, and the code would continue to work. Otherwise, I'd have to marshal the scope's variable to the controller's variable, and etc. And that's what we'll illustrate here a little bit. All right. And we're going to create a new one called add color to list. Don't need any parameters. AEC is fine. So this is basically where you specify scope, right? So if you don't include this parameter when you define your directive, you inherit the scope. If you specify these, you can kind of define your own scope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form that allows me to specify the name, the hex value, and a submit button. And this directive is going to kind of control that, and then it's going to marshal that and communicate back to the controller to say, hey, this user just added a color. We'll go ahead and do your work and do your thing. So I'm going to need a callback. I'm going to need to be able to have the controller tell me, what do you want me to do when the user's done adding a color, right? I'm going to verify that they gave me a valid color or something like that. How do you want me to hand back off to you? So I'm going to basically say that I've got a parameter that I'll take, and that's really how these get resolved, is they're parameters that you can pass into the directive. So I'm basically going to say, when you include me on the page, you need to fill out the color callback so I know who to talk to when it comes back to me. I'm going to wire up the template real quick. And really, so look, it's a simple form with some labels, and I'm basically model binding to color.name, color.hex, and I'm saying for the directive, when the user clicks the button, call this function on the directive, right? So this is a directive function. I think I'm going to leave it like this for just a second, just so we can see that it renders. All right. Good. I like that it shows up there. Hopefully I should at least get the form to render. Right, yeah, so right on. So in the directive, I just specified fields, and I model bound these to color.name, color.hex, and then I told it a function that's going to call back to when the user clicks that button. That's literally all this particular thing says. When the user clicks it, call this function. One of the things that you'll note is that I'm specifying in here color.name and color.hex, but I didn't define those in the directive, right? I didn't set those up in the directive. There are no values there. Angular is smart enough to know that if you reference a variable name that the controller didn't create, it creates it. It creates it and manages it, and the controller or the directive can then reference it, kind of thing. So I don't have to define it first in the directive or in the controller in order to gain access to it. You can also do that in line here. So what's the name of that callback? I'm going to create a function, and linking is basically very similar to the controller action. Not sure if I'm ready to go into these. not quite ready for that. But basically, I'm going to write a handler for when the user clicks this button. Double check things are wired up. Yeah, right on. And I'm going to tell it what I want to do. So really, I'm not going to put any validation in here. When the user clicks that button, I'm just going to call back to the controller, and I'm going to call back to the method that they provided me before. And I'm going to give it the values I actually mistyped that, right? Scope.color.hex. Color.name.
Hey, Tom.
Yes, sir.
We have a question from the remote users. Is it proper to define them outside the controller? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention exactly completely, but you said it's done, but is it common practice?
Define them.
I don't know what was talking about them. Do you know?
No.
Fred, can you hear me?
Define
the variables.
I don't know. I don't usually. I usually define my variables and things like that in the controller, just because I'm thinking about them as I'm writing the controller, that I'm going to need them in the view. I typically don't write the view and say, well, I'm going to need this, that, and the other, and then just use the values there. I typically am kind of thinking about it ahead of time.
Thank you.
So really, that's all this is saying, is that in this directive, when the user clicks this, I'm going to call back the method that was supplied to me, which I need to go and write now. So I'm going to write in my controller, the one that's managing this list. Okay. I'm going to write the function over here that's the callback function. We're going to say on add color, and then we're going to get two parameters, color name, color hex, right? That's the one we want back. And we're just going to slam them on the list, right? Scope.colorList. Push. We're going to push a new object onto the list. We're going to give the name parameter to the color name that we got. We're going to give the hex parameter the color hex that we get back from the directive. So the controller is basically prepared for that. And all we need to do now is just need to wire up on this side this. So the one we want to use, add color callback equals, I'm going to jump around real quick, I don't know what I typed, on add color. And we're going to say, we're going to take the color name, color, hex parameters, right? So that's really me just saying, hey directive, render your thing. When you're ready to call back, use my add on, my on add color function from the controller. I'm sure I've whacked this way out of place. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, good. I'll just type it. So that makes me feel better. Yeah. So I'm not too fast. On add color is a function. Yeah, right on. So I'm going to call it zebra color. Use my favorite item. And you can see basically I'm getting my callback, right? I pumped it onto the list, and that item has come back through to my controller. A little bit convoluted. Do you understand the callback mechanism from the directive to the controller? what I'm doing that for, and the reason for that is to decouple the two things, right? The directive doesn't have to know anything about what the controller wants to do with a color when it gets added. So I may have a color lookup function, or we may have a color picker. I could use this same drop-in, right? And it's going to say, hey, when you're done, send me back the color name and the hex value that was provided. So it doesn't have to be for the list. It could be a different controller, different view, or whatever altogether. It's just a small piece of self-contained code that provides a callback function when it's done, kind of thing.
Could you specify that if you're using the attribute?
I don't know. Yeah, so it's a great question, and I don't know. I was trying to think what that might look like, and I haven't really tried that to figure it out, but I don't know either. You guys caught what the question was? He was asking how you would specify that callback function if you use the attribute directive syntax, which is because you're saying attribute equals this, then where's your room for adding the callbacks and all that other kind of stuff? I don't know. I haven't worked through it, but I was intrigued by it too. I'm good. Step 3. Let me clean up to make sure that I haven't messed anything up. I'm surprised by that.
Get RM cached. Get RM cached. My word might not.
That?
Yeah. I don't know if you need to.
I'll just get rid of them. Show Explorer. It's barking because it knows that I'm going to create these files. But for some reason, my cleanup, I did not get rid of them. Yeah, there we go. So I just added that back in there. Make sure that I'm still running. All right. So really kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about is over in my controller. I'm doing servicey things. I'm not doing fully controller things. So things like this, the fact that I've hard coded the data set, the fact that I'm directly manipulating that data set with my controller. Those are really not my responsibilities, right? So I want to hand those things back off to a different layer that can encapsulate the rules about when those things are okay, where to get that data from, and all that kind of stuff. Really, my controller should just be responsible for setting up the data for the view and handling and marshalling the interaction from the view. The user told me to do this. Hey, service, do these things in order to achieve that function, kind of thing. So I'm going to refactor some of this a little bit and move some of these things into services. Am I doing okay on time?
Yeah, it's 7:30, but.
So I'm going to take that color list. I'm going to basically take that color list and I'm going to make it a private variable in my service. So this will kind of cheat and act like this is some kind of a data store. But I've at least encapsulated that off into the service as far as where that data is. You can see this is the private variable, and this is really kind of the API space. What we're returning in a service is an object that we can interact with, and it's going to have properties. But in my scenario, it's mostly functions, right? It's mostly methods that you can call. So we'll write out, I think, yeah. I'm basically just going to provide the API in my service. I'm going to allow the end user or the controller to get a list of all the colors. I'm going to allow them to get a specific color. Allow them to delete one. And yeah, add. All right, so we already basically saw that one. So get color list, pretty simple. All right. Make sure I don't have some typo. Yep, good. Get color list is pretty simple. Getting a specific color, I'm just going to write a quick loop. I'm just going to say if the name is equal to color name, may not be exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to return it. All right. And if for whatever reason I don't find one, I'm going to go ahead and just return it. Deleting is basically the same. So I'm going to copy pasta. And I'm going to say color list splice. I'm going to chop that one off the list. And then here, list.push, I'm going to add that same call that we had earlier, right? All right, so I basically have a service API now, right? Something that my controller can work with, rather than performing these things all on its lonesome. However, I now need to specify in my controller that I want to use that module, or I want to use that function. So again, Angular will resolve that when I run the app. It'll find that service, name that, and make it available. And I'm just going to replace these things with the appropriate calls. Service.getColors, get color list, and hopefully get a quick check. Yeah, boom. So it's still working. Really don't need you anymore. I'm not sorting. And I'm no longer going to add directly to the list, right? So I'm going to, again, marshal that off and hand that off to the service to add the color. Color hex. Give a quick test. I use Zebra because it'll be at the top of the list. Boom. All right, you guys kind of following what I'm doing here, just as far as cleaning that up, changing some of the responsibilities a little bit, and making sure that I'm not doing too much in my controller. Really, controllers should be pretty simple, and they really should only contain the things that are required to interact with the view. There should not be a whole lot of business logic and rules associated at that level. Yeah, so one of the things that I had forgotten previously. For my next step, I'm no longer going to edit these things here. I did want to be able to clean up my list. Hey, the classes and things I'm using, you guys are familiar with Twitter Bootstrap? Yeah. ng click equals delete color. So I'm just going to add a button in here so that I can remove the color that I've added. And I'm going to call this method with the color as a parameter when that occurs. So over in my controller, I'm going to define that function. And I'm going to tell the color service, hey, delete that color. And I think that it's expecting the name, right? Because it was in the loop and looking it up. All right, so let's test that. And boom, delete. Be nice to just see if the hell they go, right? So we can roll through and delete them all. Right on?
Yeah.
All right. That's the end of my step there. All good?
Nice.
All right. See if this works this time. Step 4. Yeah, right on. I don't ever do it quite the same way every time or name everything, so I have to kind of catch back up. Eventually I'm going to get to a point where I'm just going to say, hey, look what we've done. So I wanted to take out, one of the things I wanted to just illustrate was I didn't want to be able to edit these necessarily all in line. I wanted to illustrate one of the concepts that we use pretty frequently in Angular, and that's having different views, right? So instead of having text boxes here, I'm going to create 2 different screens. I'm going to add an edit button to each line item, so it'll go to a screen that will edit that item and then kind of come back to the list and show you that the values have been updated. It's kind of a common pattern to have more than one screen of execution. So what I'm going to do, you guys think about the concept of a panel, right, in .NET or whatever. You have a panel that you can see, and then a panel that you can't. And that's really kind of what I'm going to do, is I'm going to show the list, and then when the user clicks the button, I'm going to hide the list and show the edit screen, juggle a little bit of data, and then when they're done with that, I'm going to flip it and turn the list back on. Okay? In order to do that, I'm going to use a variable in the scope to kind of help me keep track of what I'm showing. And by default, I'm going to show the list, right? I'm going to add a method so when the end user clicks to edit a color, when they go to edit the color, I want to keep track of the one that was selected to edit, so I need to add another scope variable, just so I can point to that one more easily. And I'm going to change the display panel to edit, right? And when the user is done editing, I'm just going to go back and go back to the list, right? I could clean out the selected color variable and all that kind of stuff, but really I don't care that it's just holding a value there temporarily behind the scenes. So I'm going to add a button that will set that value and change the panel, and then let's go set up the panels, right? I'm going to add a div that kind of wraps around this whole thing. I'm going to use the ng-show directive. And again, Angular has a ton of them. ng-show basically evaluates the expression. If it's true, it shows it. If it's false, it doesn't. So it basically turns that content on and off. And I'm just going to say if the display panel equals list, right? And then I'm going to add another one.
And it just knows the ending div.
I copied and pasted it.
But
oh yeah, it knows the right, because Angular directives use the 2 as the container.
It's just on a CSS level. How do you show it?
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
Dumb question.
No, you're good. So when it equals edit, I'm going to show this. And then let's add the edit button, right? Sorry, everything's blowing up so big that I can't see. Come on now, you're yawning. Alright, let's edit. I think I called it edit, right? Edit color. Edit color. And hopefully we'll wire it up just a little bit here enough to. Yeah. Reload.
PHP template mine.
Yeah, right on. So you can see at least that I'm seeing that form. close it. I'm gonna cheat and take that, add the color list form, and modify it just a little bit. All right. So I'm cheating. I'm just taking that form that I wrote because it's going to be the same kind of form. But instead of color.name, it is selected color.name. Color.hex, it's the selected one. And when I'm done doing this, right? So this is basically two panels on the same page. When I click edit, I can get some variables to track some stuff. Hide that panel and show the other, which will hopefully show me the one that was selected. And when I'm done, since it's already bound, so I'm already model binding with ng model to the selected color, I don't really need to save anything, right? I don't need to explicitly save because it's already changed the values in that object. And Angular is going to pick that up immediately. All right, so I'm going to say it's orangish. Hopefully, right on. Right? Editing, ish, kind of thing. Cool. All right, so let me talk about why we don't do this and why this is the anti-pattern. Angular routing. So this is where Angular routing. I hope that's the end of my stuff. Yeah. Angular routing really does a lot of this stuff for us. So in an application where you have a lot of different screens that you're going to go through, right, juggling that state it becomes kind of a real pain, right? I'm going to have a variable, and I've got to know when to turn it to this state or that state or everything else. And then you end up having nuances, right? I've got that state, but only when this parameter is set and things like that. And that's where routing comes really in handy. Do I have time to go over routing? You guys good?
Yeah, we can leave if we need to, but this is good stuff.
Is it? I mean, yeah. I mean, if you want me to push through, I can basically pull up the next step and talk about it, or I can keep kind of keying through it.
Do it.
Yeah. All right. Right on. So routing in Angular basically is monitoring, watching the URL. It does a regular expression against that URL pattern, and then based on some configuration, decides what view and controller to show, kind of thing. So let's go in and wire that up. Let's step 5. Sorry, I know that's a pain. Check everything. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a little bit prettier on my phone before. Routing. Yeah. So routing is a library. It's not something that's in the base Angular library here, the JavaScript library. It is one that they provide, but it's optional. So Angular route. You have to include Angular route in order to gain access to this functionality. Yep, you have to add it to your module. So back when I defined the module, I was talking about the requirements here. You've got the array that tells it what libraries it requires in order for the application to run. And I'm going to have to add ng route. And that basically, when it bootstraps Angular, when it bootstraps this application, it's going to make that addressable in the application and make that usable. Where do I? Yeah. Sorry, so I've got some templates in here. So routing is all done in the config stage. I'm not going to get into some of the stages that Angular goes through, but in the config stage, once I have ng route, I have access to the route provider, and literally I'm just going to define. Oh, here, it's better off. I'm going to define the URL pattern that I want to use for turning on and off modules. So sorry, I got some case sensitivity. and then my default is name. So right now my colors are all keyed off of name. So really what this is saying is that when the URL has / colors in it, load up the color list template, manage it with this controller. When it has colors in it and it's followed by a parameter, an additional query string parameter, then load up the edit color control template and use the edit color controller. When there's nothing specified, when it's basically a blank URL, default to colors, right? So basically it's saying in the .NET world, this is your home controller or home index kind of thing, right?
Case full.
Yeah, right.
So if you went up to the URL right now and typed that in, it would go directly to that color name.
Almost. I've got a couple of things to, yeah, it will, but I've got a couple of things that I have to add because I got to move some stuff around and rename my controllers, and I've got to turn that panel stuff on and off.
Otherwise, I don't think I've seen any language use otherwise as a
Oh, right. So I'm going to rename this thing to color list controller.
Right.
And I'm going to
otherwise.
Why are you making 2 controllers?
Yeah, because generally, just best practice that you have a controller per view. So like in the .NET world for .NET MVC, I mean, you've got one controller and you've got all these views, right? And they're all handled by actions. In the Angular world, it's kind of the view and the controller are fairly tightly coupled. They kind of go hand in hand. This is the manager for that view kind of thing. It's just a little bit of a difference.
That is convention, right?
It is.
If you could use one controller.
You could, but it would get pretty hairy to add. In order to manage your code inside the controller, you have to add a lot of controls. I think it could get hairy. Yeah, right on. So I need to add a couple of additional parameters up here. So now that I've added the route provider, I'm going to use the location object in this one. And I'm going to use route params, right? So the location object allows my controllers to move, to tell the app to go to this URL, go to that URL, and things like that. And the route params object allows me to retrieve those URL parameters, right? So what was set, what color was selected, etc. Okay. So I no longer need yes, I no longer need to do this because my routing is going to handle that for me. I no longer need to juggle the panels, right? And then down here, for my edit color controller, nope, I don't need that either. So I just need to, when I go to my other, sorry, I'm struggling through talking about this one a little bit. I need to basically still set that select color. Oh, I also need the color service. All right, so I'm going to have another controller that is specified for that other form, that other view. Get color. And I'm going to find out what route parameter. Right, so when I specified that, when I defined my routes, I said that this particular view is going to include an additional parameter called color name. And that's really all I'm specifying here is that I'm going to tell the color service to get that item with the color name. Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah. I haven't broken anything terribly, even though I now need to move all my stuff into the proper templates, right? So I decided that's going to be edit color. And I'm going to move that particular code out. All right. So I now have a template and a view that's specific for that. Color list. Now have a view specific for that. And really, you can see that I don't have to change much of anything here. The big difference here is that instead of having a controller in this section, I need to add an ng view directive. Right? So that's where the magic happens. Basically the route provider, the route manager, is watching the URL for changes, and then it is looking for an ng view on the page, and that's where it's plugging in the template and the controller.
Put
right?
stuff here.
Hmm?
I said put stuff here.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So, right, render things here, and you decide what to put there. And then that configuration decides what goes there. So I've selected it. So you can tell that I fired it up. Hopefully you can see in the URL, it's redirected to the colors section. I need to change just a little bit in my color list because I no longer am going to perform when I click edit color, I need to tell it to go to that page, right? That's why I kept it in there. I'm just basically going to use the location service. What's it called? Sorry, I'm walking up a little bit. Path, thanks. Path. So in this instance, I'm going to basically say you're the colors path with color.name, right? So when I click edit, I'm basically going to change my path and come over here. I guess I do still need scope.editing. Now on the edit side, I'm basically just going to just switch back to colors. So it will feel very similar to the juggling of the panels, but it still is a pretty big value. Hopefully, if I've wired some of it up, and get my parameters correctly. But my color name is not coming through. I'm sure I typoed something here. No, I got yellow green. Oh, selected. Typo. Yeah, there we go. So you can basically see that I now have the same functionality. Right, that I had before, but Angular is now managing those views for me. I don't have to explicitly turn them on and turn them off, even though I am cheating a little bit by specifying what view to go back to from one side to the other. I can gain a lot of additional flexibility out of this. And in fact, I didn't have to specify a path here. You can also just add a URL in your links and buttons and things like that. If you want to navigate to a specific view of your application, you can just link to that URL. There's no page reload, there's no page refresh. Angular's just going to swap that view in and out kind of thing.
So if you mistype one of those paths, will it give you a 404?
Otherwise.
Yeah, it'll I'm sure it'll redirect to colors because it doesn't match a pattern. Sorry, I struggled through the routing piece. But that does get you to the last stage, and I'm not going to key this all in. I know some people were interested in the resources stuff, like the HTTP stuff. So I'm going to basically just jump to my version of the application that has that in place. But primarily what you have to understand is from a code management standpoint, right now all my data and my rules are in the services layer. And that's really all that changes for the most part. I change out the service to no longer manage that list and to retrieve those things and to push those things via HTTP instead, kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and go right to step 7. Just because some of the is a little bit hard to follow, and admittedly, I don't do a whole lot of the resource stuff myself, and it does still feel a little bit magical, kind of thing. There's a little bit of magic unicorn going on right there. But think about it like this. So Angular provides the resource object. It basically is an opinionated RESTful API. So a lot of things have very specific patterns, right? If I post to user, I'm creating a user, right? If I get user, I'm getting the list of users. If I get user / an ID field, I'm getting a specific user. If I post to that, I'm updating that user, kind of thing. So that's really all that resource is doing, is it's creating a kind of an HTTP wrapper with those patterns in mind, right? So it gives you a function to say get, delete, save, and things like that, instead of calling the actual thing with the right form methods and things like that. So, and I'll have to get to one other thing here as well. So I have to zoom out just a little bit. So really this is what you do. You set a variable, and you tell a resource to configure this URL into that variable. And basically you have to provide a couple of additional parameters, right? How it's going to resolve the optional parameter. And I had to add a couple of things in here as well, because by default the list that came back was just a collection of objects and not necessarily an array. So I had to kind of reconfigure mine so that Angular knew that what I expected back was an array. But those methods that I had before, right, so when they were returning that variable, that color list, I'm now using this new object and saying, just query, right? Query, get the list. When I get a color, I'm basically saying I'm calling that object and I'm passing in the ID of the color that I want. If you remember before, I was doing it by name, but now I actually have an ID that I'm using to track those objects, and I'll get up to that in just a little bit. I think. Deleting, I had to look up the object, I had to retrieve it from the system in order to get the ID of it, or to get a reference to the object, and then I can delete it. New is pretty straightforward. You basically just new up an object, set the values, and save it. And saving it basically takes an object that is already stored in the system. It will know that you have an ID, and it will know to update that record.
What is that on?
Yeah, right on. So because I was using an array before that was really kind of stateful, I was managing my state there. When I changed values in it, my controller already kind of knew that those values were being changed. Now that I'm retrieving this stuff on the fly, my controller doesn't know necessarily that somebody posted a color to the remote list. Now, you may have other things going on in your application that add colors to the list, right? But I'm watching a particular view. So what I'm using is the broadcast, basically PubSub, publish and subscribe, and I'm just broadcasting an event. So that's just a method up here that I called so that the global scope of the application is saying this thing just occurred. And over on the controller side, you can see that I've added, hey, when this thing occurs, get a new color list. Kind of thing. And you can see basically nothing really changed. I'm still adding color, still deleting color. These things still work. In the edit method, so this is the only thing that really changed on this controller, is I told it to actually save it, right? So when you're done editing, because before the values were model bound, yeah, my model is updated, but the server didn't get updated. So really, that's all that call is there for, is to go back out to the server and publish that thing.
So do you retain the data locally and then just push it whenever there's a change?
Yeah. So that's how one of our applications is. Yeah. So it's one of the neat things. So I have an application that is yes, very stateful. The user can pick it up and come back to it at any point, and really I'm using local storage for that state. And it's not until they've told me they're completed that I sync up with the server and say, okay, the user's done, I'm taking that full object that they gave me, and I'm providing it back to the server to process and do its thing with.
And then, of course, somebody else can be accessing the server at the same time.
Yeah.
So if a person picks up the app after, let's say, a half-hour use, does it know to sync back up the data that's on the server?
That's your implementation side of it. Yeah, that side would be your implementation. The resource piece does not provide those types of services. Yeah. So I'm gonna fire up real quick. You guys familiar with sales? Yeah, 50% off. Sales is a node. It's just a node application tool. One of the things that's really convenient about it is it makes web APIs really dead simple. So literally, I installed Sales. I told it to create a colors API, and now I'm running it, right? So now I previously loaded some data up into it. Hopefully, it's running. You see that it's already got API, right? So if I go to color, it's getting the list of colors. If I go to color 619. It gets that. So, huh? Yeah, right on. I'm not using Mongo or anything like that. It's just got a local store.
Talk about your port.
Oh, my port? Oh, right. It's the default. Sorry. I'm not that cool. Right. But again, so when I configured this, I told it to use that port and that service. One thing you'll probably be thinking of is that we've got a cross-domain issue, right? So my Angular app is now calling services on another server, another service, and I actually resolved that on here by doing some IIS proxy stuff. It was kind of a pain. Caching was really jacked up, so I really just installed a quick tool to allow me to cheat and turn off cross-origin issues. It's a small data set, but you can see that this reflects what was out there. See this? I go back and add Zebra. I should get it reflected here, but bear in mind that it only shows up here after it has been persisted to the server, right? Because I'm using that event of, yes, something actually occurred, and the server, and now I'm pulling the new list from the server kind of thing. Same stuff occurs here, though, Zebra-ish. And you see that little flash? That flash is the delay time that occurs where I send it to the server saved it, and now I know that I need to update my data.
Because you're not having a local list at all on this.
No local list at all at this point.
You're
right?
saving it to the server and then getting the full list again.
Yeah. So in this particular example, right, I got rid of all the stateful stuff, and I'm just retrieving and storing objects to the server instead. Again, the beauty of the separation of concerns is that almost all of that work was in the service layer, right? My editing, my listing, my adding, from those perspectives, nothing changed. It doesn't know that that's now coming from a remote server or a local list or whatever. You suffered through it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody, we'll do these giveaways quick. Anybody that didn't sign in that wants to be on it, start passing it around.
Yeah, we'll get rid of that.
There you go. I'll see if I can run it.
Yeah.
I'm missing like a header here.
Yeah. Oh, name email. That'll do.
I'll tell you that, like, so Angular comes with a router. I don't think anybody uses it. There's another third party tool, and maybe Angular does it. The UI router.
I don't think they do it.
Yeah, the UI router. So if you get into Angular and you still want to do the routing, you're probably going to use the UI router instead of Angular's built-in router.
Instead of NG route.
Yeah, instead of NG route, it's like UI route. It just provides a whole another level of customization and flexibility. You can do multi-views, you can do nested views, and it does this whole concept of chaining history, where you can go, it will do the navigation back and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. That's one of the first things you'll run into is once your application starts to get kind of bigger, you'll realize that the routing provided is not sufficient.
You still hit the hub.
I'm gonna say something about that. It's pretty crappy.
Firebase. Oh yeah. Yeah, you did some Firebase stuff.
Angular Fire is already.
Yeah. So that will give you a lot of that, right?
Have you read up on anything about Angular 2?
No. Only that it's a hoopla. People are upset that it's throwing away everything that you're learning right now.
So basically, you have to rewrite it.
Yeah, hopefully it was clear that that wasn't anything to.
Yeah, that's just the latest version. You do 1.3.
Yeah.
Yeah, sheets in its way.
Make a table.
Yeah, right.
Thanks so much for this. I would have really struggled with some of these things. See what I've done wrong. It's awesome.
Is everyone in? Good?
Thanks for the good help.
Ah,
It helped a
okay.
lot.
See.
It's one of those things you can struggle for 30 minutes and not realize it's that one thing right there.
One.
Right.
It's always
Just starting development stuff.
Yeah. I think it just had too much. It just had too much.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to periodically go back to the baseline.
Hey, Tom.
Right. Well, that was my fallback, right? So if I just totally host this, I can just jump to it and say, well, this is how I did it.
Pretend we typed that.
Give away all the 3 of these tonight? Is that, or is it just the 1?
3. Yeah,
Okay.
give away 3 of them.
Okay.
But remember to caveat how they can be used.
Okay, so tonight we got 1 month membership to Pluralsight. It's unlimited. You can watch all their videos on there. Awesome collection of anything web related and server related and all sorts of stuff. It's great. And the winner of that is Mario. All right. Here you go. And next we have 3 O'Reilly. It's good for 1 free download of an ebook. And I think, as I understand it, there's a QR code on here that is a little bit liberal, so keep it to yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah. O'Reilly was kind enough to give these to us,
Right.
but they also asked to limit how many were used, right? But it's the same code on all of them.
Right.
So if you give it to your friends, they won't offer us another one in the future.
Fred Lawler, who's joining us remote, has a free O'Reilly book coming to him. He's present. He's online. He's just sickly. So that is. And Kaylee, you got one too. Come on up. Woo! the last one is James, who is not present.
I'll take it.
All right, he was here. He had to be, so yeah, we'll do that. Next is Code School. Also have a 1 month membership there, and whoever gets this one, I'll need your email address, and then we'll send it over to you. I know that's after this one. Mm-hmm.
So they're keeping them two different services.
Trenton? You're good. I got your email address here, so I'll email you the 1 month for Code School. And then last is, do you want to explain the JetBrains? Is it any of them?
Yeah. So the JetBrains giveaway is for, I think you like the IntelliJ IDE or whatever. Well, really, it's anyone. Provide me an email address, and I'll send it to JetBrains, and basically let me know, and I'll send you a link when we're done, about what the products are that they offer, but really the JetBrains giveaway is for any one of their IDE products. So it could be PHP Storm, WebStorm, IntelliJ IDE, or whatever. You kind of pick. My understanding, though,
it's a long drum roll.
They were kind enough to give to signed up, and I went with the PHP Storm. My understanding is that they update some of those products more rapidly. So PHP Storm, WebStorm are getting a lot of updates, while the IntelliJ stuff will eventually get those features and functions. That sometimes it lags. It's apparently a much more powerful suite, but also does not receive the level of updating that PHP Storm does.
They have something good for Android, though. What it's called.
Oh yeah, I think the new official Android build software that came out was built on top of IntelliJ. I think. Yeah.
What's it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Eclipse is dead. IntelliJ is the thing now.
Oh, their ADT or
yeah.
Development kit.
Right.
Yeah. So the winner for JetBrains is Jordan Morgan. Yeah.
My works one was for last one.
Perfect.
You got an email?
Yep, it's down here.
Okay.
Dreaminginbinary.co. All right.
Dreaminginbinary.co.
Yeah. Okay. Yep, we got it. Sweet. Normally we go out to Uncle Bentley's. In interest of time, whether it's safety, I'm not going. I don't know if some other people are. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways,
I'll have a beer.
There you go. There you go. Cool.
It might take a while to use your car.
It's a short trip. You don't need to see.
All right. See you guys next month. Thanks.
We all want to go down, right?